Right, so as we're just after halfway into the session now, and I think I've sussed a couple of things out. Obviously with the practice today, we're not trying to build a big weight, it's more sussing out things for Sunday's match. So what I'm going to try and do is basically try and replicate the start of the session again, because it looks like that long line's gone fairly dead. I'm going to put in, I've just put in 3, I'm putting in now the 4th ball, and basically I'm going to try and suss out how long it takes for the fish to respond to that. I know there's fish in the general area, but what I want to know is how long it takes them to settle and what settles over it. So what I might do is fish over it after the first sort of 15 minutes to see if that generates a response. If there's nothing there, have a look after half an hour and then an hour and just see what crops up. But I definitely think with the shorter line, topping up with little nuggets of feed is definitely the best way to go. So we'll get this cupped in now, and then put another little nugget over the shorter line. Again, in a match, you definitely wouldn't top up with another 4 balls like this, but I just want to try that today and just see how the fish respond. So that's the 4 balls out long. I'm just putting in a ball of feed over the roach line, probably the size of a golf ball, something like that. Again, loads of hemp, castor and dead maggot in that. I just want to sort of gauge the response. So it'll be interesting to see now when I go over the top of that 4 ball feed that I've put in over the long line, if you like, if there's any fish that have responded to that really quickly. Because it might be in the case this morning or even on the match, like, because it's a habit of what I do is leaving a sort of decent initial feed for a good half hour, an hour before I fish over the top of it. Might be the case that a few skimmers came straight into the feed and I might have missed out on those fish, so I want to see if that's the case. I'm expecting that it isn't, but it'll be interesting to see if I do get bites straight away after the initial feed. Because obviously 4 balls going in, it's plenty of disturbance, and especially when the fish are cagey, you'd think they'd sort of scatter away from it, and then gradually as they gain confidence they'll settle over the feed, and that's when you start catching them, and that's why it usually takes quite a while to catch consistently over a large feed. And equally the fish have got loads of different options in terms of picking out food items apart from your hook baits. Obviously as they work their way through the feed, that's when you start getting more and more bites, as the fish are more confident and there's less food items for them to pick out. So we'll give it sort of 10-15 minutes on this. Actually, I've had a bite in a fish straight away. Not sure what this is, it feels like a decent stamp fish. Wasn't expecting that so quick. Especially with how rich in feed that those balls that I'm putting on the long line are. We'll see what this is. That's a nice roach. So in the match I might have missed out on a few of these fish that might have come straight to the initial feed on the long line. And that's a cracking stamp roach, is that. So again, that's a little thing that I'll probably employ actually on Sunday, is going straight over the top of the initial feed on the long line. I think I'll put, so like I say, I'm starting to build a bit of a picture of now what I could do to try and catch better than I did last week. I certainly think putting sort of 4 balls in long, going straight over the top of it, putting 2 in short, and then seeing if you catch a couple of quick bonus fish over the initial feed, and then going on to the short line once a few roaches have established themselves there, and then just keep that ticking over with smaller nuggets of ground bait until the skimmers rock up on your long line. I think that could be the way to do it. And obviously just keep the bonus fish line fed as and when you want to drop on it. Again, I certainly don't think it's worth investing loads of time in terms of having a bait over that bonus fish line, because if you are catching, you want to be catching quickly over your ground bait lines. But I've caught that first roach before those balls have even started to break down. Like I say, those will take probably a good half hour before they start to break down and disperse fully. It's noticeable that there's hardly any fizzing coming off that long line where I've fed, and on the shorter line there's a lot more activity in the water from that more active mix. So hopefully having the combination of a nice inert mix further out and an active mix closer in, it gives the fish a choice, and like I said, the more active mix will draw the fish in, and then the more inert mix should hopefully give them somewhere to settle. So that's been in there for probably a couple of minutes now. I've not had a bite as yet. There's a little indication there. So the fish certainly come to the feed a lot quicker than I thought they would do. There we go, that's fish on straight away, where I've put that smaller nugget to feed him on the roach line. Smaller fish is to be expected, but again it shows how quick that those fish will respond to it. Just hooked nicely in the bottom lip, that one. So definitely think that's a line that could keep going pretty much all day just by feeding little nuggets of feed like that. Being that the fish will come straight to it and they should work their way through it quite quickly. Again, with it being a mix that will break up nice and quick. You're not so much waiting for fish to settle over it as opposed to getting them to respond to the activity in the peg and then catching them until they clear it out and then just topping up again to draw them back in. Right, so I've just dropped over the chopworm and caster line just with this 4x16's rig, as I said earlier, because I've got them all plumbed up at the same depth, but for different areas of the peg I can sort of chop and change. I've just put a caster on just to see if there's anything down there. And I've hooked a better fish here. Certainly a bit of weight to it. That's a lovely big roach again. So again, it's always worth just spending 5 minutes trying something a bit different, and that's definitely something that I'll have to try on the match on Sunday. Lovely caster roach, that. Again, I'm not surprised those fish are down there, but I've tried maggot over the top and it's not really produced that many of them. I've had sort of a couple of them, but that one took the caster within probably 30 seconds of the bait going in. So whenever something like that happens, it's always worth just trying it again and seeing if it was a fluke. If it wasn't, then it's definitely a tactic that is worth employing to try and target better roaches. That it's not the most conventional way of fishing a caster line, is this, where you loose feeding and fishing a bulk rig over the top. It's sort of the wrong way of doing things, but when I fished a caster through the water, there's a lot of small fish that intercept it. I was just bombing a caster straight to the bottom. Looks like a few fish have settled there. And again, that'll be as a consequence of putting in big pouches of caster rather than loose feeding constantly, and putting in that sort of sedge peat chopped worm mix as well, which is just going to go straight to the bottom. Nice steady bite, smaller fish on the caster. I think we'll try it once more and just see if it was just by chance that smaller roach has intercepted it. But again, they're not a bad stamp, these. I think it's certainly a useful tip, is what I've said regarding finding areas in the peg, so I've got a margin line and an open water line that's exactly the same depth. So it's dead quick to drop between all three of my different lines. So put on a single caster again, we'll try lowering it in next to the reeds. It was definitely the case in matches that the better stamped fish were caught by the reeds from one or two of the pegs. But it was quite obvious that they weren't caught in huge numbers. It wasn't a case of 20 pound was coming out from next to the reeds and it was sort of 5 pound from open water. The weights were quite comparable. So I certainly think if you can work on a quicker way to catch next to the reeds, say with a bulk rig like this, you might have a chance to put quite a lot of weight in the net. A bit of an indication straight away. And I've still been sort of randomly checking over that longer skimmer line and nothing's there as yet. So I definitely think it's a case of if you feed in sort of, that was a bite again, sort of 4 or 5 balls of the skimmer mix, it's worth dropping on it for a quick look for the first couple of minutes, see if there's, you know, 1 or 2 fish that have cropped up out of interest. And then obviously going onto the roach line and focusing on that. See if double caster works. And I'm just intrigued to see if the sort of feeding chop worms and casters as I have attracts those big roach and obviously give you a chance of a perch. But fishing a worm, it seems, is a bit too selective and you don't get as many bites. So if I can get away with fishing, say, casters over the top on either a strung out rig or a bulk rig like this preferably, sort of getting through to the better roach, and then I've still got a chance of catching a perch rather than sort of narrowing my options and fishing worms on one of the Chianti type rigs. So just see if we get a bite on double caster. There's definitely a few fish in the area. There we go, that's a fish on the double caster. This could be another one of these good roach. Certainly fight well on light gear. I think you could probably get away with a single 5s elastic as opposed to a 4, but I always prefer to fish lighter elastics where I can. Here's another nice roach. So that's definitely something to consider for Sunday. He's fishing a bulk rig up against the reeds. Still nice and light and refined for roach, but fishing with double caster or single caster for those sort of stamp fish. So I think again I'll go for a bit of a change and I'll try a section of worm over the top of that. Again, only a small section, but I know from experience on here in 1 or 2 of the matches when I've done that I've caught a slightly better stamped skimmer nearer a feature. It's just a small section of worm, tip with a pink, and we'll see if that does anything by the reeds. Again, I'm fairly happy that I've sussed out what's going on with the ground bait mixers, especially that short line and equally feeding the long line. So I think it's a case now just trying to experiment a little bit by fishing down against the reeds and seeing what the best way of attacking that is. Right, so that's a smaller fish now on a section of worm. Definitely think though in the match it's probably going to be worth trying these light rigs, say with single or double caster, over the top of that chop worm sort of bonus fish line, if you like. Again, it doesn't seem to make that much difference when you go over the ground bait with casters, but certainly on that bonus fish line, we've had sort of three fish, one small roach and two sort of 12 ounces or so, which in a match that could make a world of difference to the weight at the end. So I'm just going to try double caster for a third time and see if that produces another one. But it's really interesting this, because I thought that I'd have probably been sort of plagued with small fish fishing casters on this line, because when I've tried the really light rig with the number 3s elastic and strung 11s with single or even double caster over this line fishing through the water, I've just been pestered with small fish. But as soon as I've put a bulk rig on, the stamp seems to have got better, and I've still always got the chance of catching a bonus perch on double caster as well. Don't think this is a big fish. No. It's probably 2 or 3 ounces though, so it's not a bad stamp. Certainly bigger than when I was fishing the caster through the water. Right, so a quick update now as we're getting into the last hour of the session. Obviously, as you can see today, we've sort of chopped and changed between everything that we're doing, but as I said earlier, that's sort of the essence of a practice session, is to try and suss a few things out. Now, what we've obviously been doing is I've been working on that short line. I think I've sussed that with topping up with nuggets of ground bait. We've just spent a bit of time fishing casters over the chop worm line for a couple of better roach, and then what I've done, because it's been pretty much bang on an hour since we fed those 4 balls of ground bait on the long skimmer line, I've just gone straight out, and in 2 chucks I've had 2 lift bites and 2 skimmers, both about 6 ounce apiece. So that's pretty much a carbon copy of how it went at the start of the session when we put those 3 balls in long, left it an hour, went over the top of it and caught 3 skimmers. The only difference being after I've put 4 balls in, it might be because it's later in the day, the stamp seems to be a bit bigger. But with this sort of really positive rig, I've had a couple of lovely lift bites, both on double maggot, so I'm just fishing a red and a fluoro. And it just seems to be working really well. Hopefully we'll have the same happen again. So again, that just sort of reassures me that in a match situation like we'll have on Sunday, I can probably get away with putting 4, maybe even 5 balls long, which seems like a lot of feed this time of year, especially with all the micros in it. But it means that I can leave that line with confidence and know that when the skimmers do turn up, they'll settle and they'll stay there. So in the last match on Sunday, I put 2 balls on each line, then tried to work out how best to top each of them up, whereas I think if I sort of split them a little bit more in terms of how I feed them, I think that could well be the best way to go. Being that I've caught a few smaller skimmers on the sort of shorter line, I think the case being that the skimmers are coming in because of the fish meal, and then as the bigger skimmers start to settle over the main sort of skimmer line, if you like, it's pushing those smaller fish out to where the shorter ground bait line is. And that's why initially when I've put in the roach mix, I've caught sort of a few roach and then eventually started catching a couple of little skimmers over the top. Bit of a lift there. Looks like a liner. But interestingly, switching to this really positive rig where I was getting a few little sort of daft indications on the 416 sort of pencil rig. As soon as I've gone onto this, it's just been, both bites been really nice positive lift and a proper skimmer on rather than missing loads of little daft bites. It also means that bait's pinned to the bottom, so skimmers, well, it's less likely to get taken by roach as well. but I don't think there's any roach in the area. Like I say, when we fished it after the first hour, we had 3-4 skimmers, and then eventually the skimmers left and the roach came in. So I think when the skimmers are there, the roach quickly move on to that shorter line, and that's where they'll settle. But interesting, I've tried sections of worm over this line, and that's produced nothing. Whereas switching to maggot hook baits, maggots and casters on the hook, definitely the best way to go today. Just try resetting that rig slightly more to the side. Like I say, what I don't want to do is just hammer one area of the peg. So I'm just trying out what I did on Sunday's match, and just fishing sort of the left hand side, then the right hand side, then trying directly over the feed and just seeing whereabouts the fish are settled. But interestingly today, as opposed to Sunday where I had 6 or 7 F1s and lost a carp, today I think I've only had one foul hook carp down by the reeds, and I've not had any over the ground bait lines. So I'm not sure why they've not pestered us today, but it might well be the way that I've fed it. I think with sort of a bigger initial feed, especially on the skimmer line, another indication there's definitely fish in the peg. I think definitely by putting a bigger area of initial feed on it, on the skimmer line, if a carp comes in, it'll probably just eat a couple of mouthfuls and then it'll move away and still leave some bait down there. Whereas I think when I fed it on Sunday and put 2 balls and then kept topping up with a decent sized ball, it just sort of kept attracting the carp back into the peg. But it also meant that when a carp did come into the peg, it had every opportunity to clear out that area of feed. So we'll see if we get another skimmer or 2 fishing like this, and then we'll probably have another look at the roach line before we conclude the session. Right, so we've just had a bite now on an expander pellet. I've just tried this over the longer line, fishing for the skimmers. It feels like it could be a roach, this. Again, it's not something I intend to use in the matches, expanders, but I just thought it's worth a try, just to see what you can catch on them. It's taken a while for the bite. Yeah, and it's another nice big roach. It's probably not worth it in the match, sort of for the risk of hooking the F1s and carp, but it goes to show that it is an option, and I've caught a lovely roach on it, so something to think about. Possibly, say if I was getting pestered with really tiny fish, going onto an expander might be a better shout than, say, fishing the maggot. But I think what we'll do for the last sort of 15 minutes, we'll just try fishing casters again up against the reeds and see if we can catch any other bonus fish. Because I'm happy that I've sussed out how to fish that long line. I'm definitely thinking the match, probably 4 or 5 balls over that, and setting up the skimmer rigs definitely works, and just leaving it for between an hour and an hour and a half to settle. Probably feeding 2 balls short, and then just topping up with little nuggets to keep it ticking over, and then, like I say, fishing the caster up against the reed beds or feature. So I'm going to pick up this time a bit of a change, the 0.4 rig, which I've got set up for the skimmers. I'm just going to try this up against the reeds again. Reason being, this will be about sort of an inch over depth, which is a bit more suited to fishing casters. But I've got 3 droppers on this, whereas opposed to 4/16 pencil float style rig, wasn't really getting the fall of the caster to the bottom on that. Whereas this I'll be able to, but equally with it being a bulk, it should get through any small fish that are up by the surface. Just lowering that rig in there, and we'll see what that produces. And I definitely think in the match, fishing sort of the chop worm rigs, if you like, and more positive rigs, I think that's only going to come into it, say, if you're way behind in the match and you need sort of bonus fish to catch back up. But I think sort of rotating these sort of 3 lines, if you like, and just fishing with the variation on sort of the roach rigs, I think should pretty much cover most bases for getting bites at any point in the day. I'll say that really positive rigs works really nice for a few of the better skimmers. Certainly the 416s pencil rigs being best for the roach, and I think again if it went really funny and when there's a lot of pressure on the water, that can always happen, and you can sort of, it can be like there's no fish in your peg. That's when I go down to the much lighter rigs, but today I've not had to use them. So I'll just give this another pouch caster over the top. And what's interesting, as soon as I've fired that pouch casters over the top of the rig there, I've had indications straight away which is telling me that small fish are attacking the casters as soon as they're hitting the surface and the fish are coming off bottom. So actually for fishing down the edge, I think it's worth loose feeding casters, but I think putting big pots of the chop worm and sedge peat mix in and fishing a bulk rig over the top might well be better than loose feeding and fishing strung out rigs. I mean, obviously if the peg's sort of 3 foot deep down the edge and that's where you've got a feature, then I think loose feeding's probably better in that instance, but where you've got a depth like we've got there, about sort of what must be going on for 5.5 foot, it definitely seems that a bulk rig is better for getting through the small fish to the bottom. Right, so we've just had a nice lift bite there. I'm not sure what this is yet. Could be a skimmer or it could be an F1. But I think whatever it is, we'll probably call this the last fish of the session. We've not had any F1s today at all. And like I say, we think we've foul hooked 1 carp. Hoping this is a good skimmer. Gave a nice little lift on the float. Just got to be careful because of the amount of reeds to my left. It does feel like an F1 to be fair, but I've been known to be wrong. Well, like I say, I think we'll call this the last fish of the day and get them weighed in. Certainly fighting well. Oh, what have we got here? Yeah, it is a little F1, I think, this. So what we'll do, we'll get him unhooked and we'll get him popped back and we'll call that the last fish of the day. Again, because it's silvers only, we're not going to put him in the keep net. But gave a proper sort of lift bite like you'd expect from a skimmer, that one. Like I said, we'll get him popped back and we'll get the net out and have a look what we've caught, get them weighed in and sort of summarise the session. Right, so as you can see there, that's our final net of fish, £10 on the dot. So there's a bit more there than what I thought there was. I thought it might have been £8.5 today. Obviously we've not fished purely to catch the weight, it's more been about the methods employed and trying to refine a few tactics for this Sunday's match and sort of improve on what I did last Sunday. And I certainly think with a couple of tweaks to the rigs, it certainly made a big difference, especially when it comes to catching these sort of skimmers. Like I said, we've had 2 or 3 that sort of size and those certainly boosted the weight, and equally some of these lovely stamp roach as well. Again, on the match last Sunday, a lot of them were sort of small fish, sort of that sort of size, little skimmers like that I caught, you know, sort of 2-3 ounce stuff like that. Whereas they, although we've had less bites, I've made sure that we've caught a better stamp of fish, and I certainly think if I'd have spent more time sort of fishing the lines, as I said, you know, towards the end of the session how I was going to do it, I certainly think, you know, we could have done sort of 15-20 pound today without a doubt, and hopefully, like I say, I'll put those into practice on Sunday and try and improve on the weight from last week, and hopefully get a double figure bag if I can, and like I say, hopefully do well in the match. So we'll get these popped back, but hopefully there's 1 or 2 things that we've run through today that will be useful in your fishing when you're fishing for silverfish on a commercial like this. So yeah, as ever from Last Cast, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you on that next episode.